Good morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock on May 14th. We're going to get our property committee meeting started off. If you can just give me a minute, I'll share my screen. Can everybody see that? Yes? All
Yes.
right, so we have a pretty good agenda today. We have an operations update from Mr. Watley. We have two transportation brief updates that Mr. Bray will be presenting, and then we will hand it over to Mr. Grice from CHA to give us an update on our middle school project um, update. So we'll start off, and I'll hand this over to Mr. Watley.
Good morning. We're continuing district-wide weeding and mulching, making sure that the beds look good around the campus. We're also focusing on the spring sports field maintenance, making sure the fields are lined, the grass are cut, and everything is ready for the kids to play as well as the community. We're preparing for the high school graduation. We've had several meetings. We think we're all set in that area. And we're also preparing for the transitional grade move-up ceremonies throughout the district. District-wide preventative maintenance continues throughout the building with the roofs, HVAC units, and everything that is should be in working order in the schools. We're going to focus on perimeter tree work at Erdenheim. They're in the back parking lot. It's overgrown, so we're going to make sure that that looks good and trim back and cut back. And of course, summer cleaning and changing of the HVAC filters, as well as painting in the buildings to make sure that our buildings look good for students to have a good environment to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Are there any questions about what's happening in maintenance and grounds on a daily basis and for future? Any questions or comments?
None from me.
Awesome. I just want to give a shout out to the grounds and maintenance guys. The campus looks great. I know Dr. Yannicone and Charles do walks weekly to make sure that the grounds are ready to go for all of our activities that are happening in preparation for the end of the school year. So awesome job to the facilities crew.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is a stop arm bus safety pilot update. As you recall, I believe it was last meeting, we gave a brief update about stop arm enforcement, the program that's happening right now throughout the state. And we talked about running a pilot program, putting cameras on 5 of our buses. So Mr. Bray is going to give an update to that pilot.
Okay, good morning. So as it says on the screen, we got a pilot up and running for those 5 buses. The initial installation and configuration of the systems took our vendor a little bit longer than they initially had hoped for or intended. So our numbers for the beginning of this data collection start at about April 27th. As of yesterday, we have 8 across those 5 buses. We have a total of 8 violations that those cameras automatically detected. After human review, 2 of them would most likely have been canceled. That I asked for clarification from local police what they would prefer to see in that. And 2 of those violations specifically, they said, yeah, they didn't feel like that one, or those 2, I should say, would have met the criteria. 6 of those violations would have likely been issued citations. And there's actually one additional one that in the human review process of one of the automated ones, local police said they would have been likely to cite 2 vehicles that passed the stop school bus kind of at the same time rather than just the second one. That is an area where, were we to go ahead with this program, our vendor is certainly able and willing to work with our local police department to understand their specific criteria for what a violation looks like and can kind of change the timing on what the camera considers a violation as vehicles would travel past a stopped school bus. So that's where we stand. Interestingly, just yesterday, I received a message from our vendor saying they were doing a little bit more poking, and they do believe that while our initial installs had a couple of speed bumps that were not expected, they're seeing that some of the buses are not reporting as often as they should right now. So they believe that there is still a software problem with their platform. They made some changes for some other jurisdictions as it relates, I believe, to Florida and New York City. And those changes actually changed what that installation process should look like. and just kind of messed up their installation documents. So they do think that some of the buses are not checking in as often as they should. They're working on that right now. So they are saying that we may, through the month of June, see a little bit of a spike in the numbers we're seeing, though I would not expect that to be drastic. With what this program looks like, a cost to continue the program with this specific vendor would be about $55,500 for the 26-27 school year. And basically what that is the hardware costs for the cameras that would be going on the vehicle and the software licensing to run those cameras. That is year one. If we would make that commitment, year one is about the 55.5. The following 2 years in 27, 28, and 28, 29, running nothing more than those 5 buses, the annual cost, annual total cost across the 5 would be about $10,000. So across the second 2 years, it's about $20,000 because the hardware would already be paid off. At that point, it would just be the software licensing, and we would pay additionally a small fee per it's about a $37 fee per violation that was detected. However, again, at that point, those fees are kind of being made up as violations come in, provided they would be paid by the motoring public. Those fees would go away. So we have submitted proactively, hopefully, a grant application. There was a specific school bus safety grant open where the deadline to apply was April 30th. We did submit an application to see if we could get about $50,000 of this project covered. We will not hear about that probably for the next 2 to 3 months. The state is hoping to announce within the next 2 to 3 months. We are going to be working with our vendor. Our pilot is supposed to be ending as school winds down in the end of June. What we would like to avoid, especially not knowing what that grant is going to look like, we don't want to pull these cameras off, have to patch holes in buses, things like that, and then find out that we've been awarded a grant come September. So we are going to be working with the vendor to see if they'll extend that pilot a little bit so that if we would be awarded that grant, don't basically have to reinstall things that just came off of vehicles. But that's kind of where the program stands at this point, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Prior to any questions, let me just jump in very quickly as Nate went through everything. So the recommendation from administration at this point is, again, we're looking to extend the pilot just because there's been some hiccups with the activity of the cameras and making sure that we have really good data. Our recommendation is that we would if we would be successfully awarded the grant, that we would move forward to continue this with the 5 buses that we have identified that the cameras are on. And then that would give us the opportunity to get a whole school year's worth of data to see if we wanted to pursue then moving forward and putting cameras on additional buses. So at this point, we're looking to work with the vendor to extend the pilot. That puts us through the time period of whether or not we get the grant awarded. If the grant is awarded, which covers the big costs of the equipment installation, then our recommendation would be to move forward with these 5 buses. And just as a recall, and Nate, please confirm, these 5 buses are heavily trafficked route areas. So these would be the 5 buses that if incidents would occur, these would be the routes that they would most likely occur on if there were violations. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I just wanted to put that out there before questions, and I see KD with her hand up. So
hi. Thank you for explaining all this. I know we talked about this last time that money is not the only consideration, but just out of curiosity, or you probably told me this last time, how if those 6 violations actually had become citations, what would be the financial gain or impact from that?
So the approximate financial gain to the district from 6 violations would be $1,200. So
Okay.
I figure that we would receive approximately $200 per violation. There's a little bit of fluidity there, only in what we're paying the vendor. Like I said, it's like a $37 fee per transaction. Based on what the law says, the owner operator of the camera and/or bus of the $300 citation, $250 of that is set aside for that operator. So if I take kind of that $37 off the 250, that's where I estimated about $200 per violation.
Okay, and that was over a period of less than a month. So it sounds like we would get that, either we get that $10,000 back or we have safer driving around the buses. Seems like a win-win. Am I understanding that correctly?
I would agree with that assessment. I think that where we have a little bit harder time and want to be really cautious about is that initial $55,000. However, once
Right.
that is
Yeah,
covered,
I'm
I
assuming
think
I'm
it's
assuming getting the grant.
significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's significantly at that point more likely that across 5 vehicles on the road that we can cover the $10,000 per year, most likely
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
those vehicles that are running. Again, an X factor would be as if citations are not being paid. That is in Pennsylvania a
Hmm.
little bit tricky because then it brings in a collections process rather than something like a vehicle registration suspension process. So
Okay.
there's some nuance as to what that program looks like, and
Hmm.
how the district and vendor choose to work together to pursue payment if it's not
Hmm.
done.
Hmm.
So that's kind of an underlying risk. But again, longer answer for yes, I would anticipate we probably can cover 10,000 a year.
Okay. And is there any, or are there plans to like advertise or communicate to drivers, hey, like we're gonna fine you if you do this, so don't do it?
At this time, we, the district, have not talked about those plans. I think that would be a joint conversation between the district, the local police, and probably the
Hmm.
township.
Okay.
At this point in the pilot, while we do know that there is interest from the local police in what these programs look like, we have not had the formal conversations about, pulling the trigger, going live with
Got it.
a fully implemented program.
All
I
right.
think
You want
those
to see the pilot
conversations would
first.
come at that
Okay.
time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Uh, this is really interesting. Thank you so much.
Neil? You're muted. I can't hear you.
My first Zoom meeting. Thanks. So this may have been said already, but the 55,500, that's just to keep the 5 buses, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're not talking about rolling this out on every bus. We're talking about keeping these high traffic routes, and then might be a future discussion, but at least for now, if the grant comes through and whatnot, it's just these 5 buses.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on this? And again, we'll revisit this at the time, but that is our recommendation. I just want to make sure that the property committee is okay with that recommendation, that if we are awarded the grant, that we will then run this program on the 5 buses. Obviously, we will bring that back to a property committee to give an update on where that status of the grant is and how we will move forward. Because as Nate said, nothing has been formally been negotiated or spoken to with the local police department. We will have to get that all in order. So those will be actions that we need to do before we fully implement this program across the 5 buses. Everybody okay with those recommendations?
Yeah, I think you might
Yes.
have just answered the question I was thinking of asking, which was this going to our meeting? What is that, next week, I think? But I think you just answered that and said, no, it probably wouldn't be till like the fall, it sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. And I just a comment, when we do roll this out in the fall, because I'm sure we'll move forward with it most likely, is there a way to, I don't know, to pitch it, to explain like to the community in terms of why we're spending this money, that it's not us, it's the community, because people can't do what they're supposed to do? Like, no, I'm serious. Like, I know there's sometimes comments that we're spending money on different things, but something to say, like, it's not that we're doing this, it's because we have to do this because of the community's failure to follow, I don't know, safe driving rules or whatever the wording would be.
Yes, I'm sure once we get into, once we find out if we are successfully awarded the grant application, I think that then will spark all of the formal conversations, and then I think there will be a joint plan. Plus, I'll defer to Dr. Yannicone on the overall communication from the district, but I'm sure like we have multiple newsletters that go out. There's different things to advertise that this program is being put in place, and the reasons why it's being put in place.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. And I think it's a great point. Eileen, every year in August, Nate assembles a newsletter on transportation safety reminders for the community, and they're broad, everything from bus behavior and where to stand at a bus stop to be as safe as possible with your children, to the kinds of things that we have in place from a safety standpoint, including cameras on the buses and radio systems with the drivers and home base. So we would include information on this new pilot in that newsletter before the start of the school year. And then it would also be duplicated in my back to school newsletter and the principals. So we would try to get that message out in multiple places at the start of the school year and then periodically through the year. For example, we've had a couple of occasions to do safety reminders regarding transportation as the weather changes, especially when it snows, because we've had some issues regarding safety, even people just shoveling their walks so that kids have a safe spot to stand when they're waiting for the bus. So we would include it in all of those communications.
Thank you.
Harry, you're muted now. We are all learning Zoom all over again.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So I started to say that we are revisiting this conversation. We want to give a brief update on the alternative fuel research that Nate and I have done. We've had conversations. It started off with electric buses. We went down that path and researched that. And we talked about following up on looking at alternative fuel options for our vehicle fleet. So one of the things that Nate and I have done over the past months is we're continuing to research and analyze, purchasing versus alternative fuel buses with our current diesel versus, and right now propane is the one that is sticking out. Again, we went down the path of researching electric vehicles, and we're just not there yet with infrastructure. I don't think the technology and the infrastructure for the overall electric bus structure is in place at all to introduce. So we wanted to continue that process. And that coincides with our bus replacement because we put a bus replacement schedule out. So if we were looking to do something differently, we didn't want to continue purchasing diesel buses and continue down that road if we were looking to do something differently. So I'm going to hand this over to Nate to talk about the research that we were doing regarding propane, which has kind of become the cleaner and greener fuel in school buses. And then we can talk about how we would like to move forward and what we're looking to do.
Okay, so propane, as we're saying on the slide here, is an increasingly common fuel in medium duty, what would have formerly been diesel engines. A number of school districts in our region are using it, are happy with it. The directors that I talked to from said school districts, when asked if they would consider going back to a diesel vehicle, all of them say no, absolutely not. They love their propane fleet. We have been a little bit slow to look at adopting propane in part because the larger vehicles that we buy, which is referred to as a type D, but the type of vehicles that we purchase have not been available in propane. It's just a different build of the vehicle. The engine is in a different spot, and it took a little bit more engineering to make that work. So we have continued to go with that type of vehicle just because of the size, both for passenger capacity as well as cargo capacity. We can actually fit a little bit more in our buses, and it works really well in our district for the type of operation that we run. At this point, our the vendor that we most commonly work with when purchasing vehicles, larger vehicles, anticipates that it's looking like a propane engine is probably going to be released for model year 2027. As well as the vendor out there that handles those propane conversions to make the engines propane compatible. So while it has not been released by Bluebird yet, we're kind of at a point of saying the belief is that it's going to be arriving on the market relatively soon. and is something that may be of interest to this district, both for the cost of the fuels that are running the buses, and propane is a greener fuel in tailpipe emissions. It's certainly not as green as electric, but it's a little bit more feasible based on budgets, and definitely greener than diesel fuel and gasoline. So when we look at doing that, the probably largest barrier that we initially see is, again, infrastructure in what it looks like to be able to put a propane tank the size needed on site. And as we look at this, where Ms. Green mentioned the fleet replacement schedule, we just want to be careful that as we start to look at replacing additional vehicles, I have been known to say, if I could say right now, I never want to buy another diesel powered vehicle, I would say it if that is feasible. So I'm excited about the prospect of moving off of diesel. However, we need to be prepared if we were going to look at doing that to understand what that infrastructure looks like and recognize the challenges that we face at the current transportation department to fit a tank the size that we would need in. It does look like, working with multiple vendors, we would be able to do a smaller startup if we so choose. If we order the first 4 propane type buses, we can start with a smaller propane tank and do so in a fiscally responsible, way that does not cost us more in the long run to start with a smaller tank, but eventually need to go larger. However, we think it's really important that if we looked at doing this, we understand what that long-term plan is. It's not going to be worth it for us to only ever buy and operate 4 propane buses, but then switch back to gasoline or diesel because we just don't have the ability to do that infrastructure. So even if we can start a little bit smaller, we want to make sure that there is a longer term plan to be able to grow the size of that tank and meet the needs of a 60 vehicle fleet that would be primarily converted over to propane as we get a little bit bigger.
So I'm going to jump in quickly before, if there's any questions, we'll certainly entertain those. But we have CMTA ICS looking right now and over the summer at the transportation center. We have had discussions previously that there's some decisions that need to be made or some work that will need to be done eventually at the transportation center. So again, this goes hand in hand with this type of conversation, and it also goes hand in hand with our bus replacement. We have some challenging things with diesel fuel emissions coming up in the next 2 cycles, I believe, about that the standards are going to be a little bit tougher, so the cost is tougher. Also, right now, we are locked in through June of 2026 with our diesel rates. So we got locked in, and I know Nate looked these up, so I'll let him chime in on the actual number. But one of the challenges that is happening right now with diesel, as you all know, is the cost of diesel is high. So the IU has extended the current vendor that we use. So we lock in our rates through the IU bidding. And so we've been waiting. Everybody's kind of waiting for them to start releasing so we can lock in. And what happened was they never awarded a vendor. They just came out last Friday to the business administrators indicating that they are going to extend the current vendor for 1 year. And then we are waiting for we get daily emails, Nate and I, that give the fueling prices. And then depending on what you want to lock in, you can lock in at a rate. So it's kind of one of those things that you take a look at the rates and you want to figure, do we hedge our bets? Do we wait a week and see what it's going to be like next week? What's the conditions that's causing prices to drive up or maybe drive down? That has not happened. We typically get that information, I would say March, like April, March is when that all starts happening. We have not seen prices at all. So we are waiting to see what the cost of diesel is going to be that we can lock in for the 26-27 school year. So in conjunction with all of that, with the future fuel emissions where diesel is right now, that's what Nate said. And I was on a couple of meetings with him regarding propane. I also know at the time, Stephen Scrocky, he was at North Penn. North Penn has converted to propane. A lot of positive things to be said, but in the interim of all of that, there's the bigger issue that if we convert to any type of alternative fuel, we are going to have to take a conversation and take a look at the transportation depot on how we can accommodate that. So we're not ready to have that discussion yet. We want to have that at a future property committee meeting. Nate and I have looked at the bus replacement schedule. We are in line with kind of pushing back a little bit, putting any purchases being brought forward until we can have that better discussion. Because again, we don't want to move forward with diesel if we can, in the short term, look at transitioning to propane and starting to kind of cycle out. Because once we buy a diesel bus, that is a 15 to 20-year purchase. So that's overall arching on what we're looking at and just a update on this agenda topic. So at this time, are there any questions? Go ahead. Neil, I think, was the first that put his hand up.
I was going to speak out of turn, but I figured I'd raise my hand. Thanks. So the evaluating the fueling infrastructure, so that's happening this summer. Do we think we'll have a determination by the end of the summer as to what's possible there? Or are we going to end up in a situation where we're pushing for, the future transportation needs and then delaying purchases and then falling behind on the what we need for buses?
I think this summer we'll have an idea of what that looks like for a longer term solution. And then if the board and if the property committee wants to move forward with those longer term solutions, then as Nate said, there's a short term solution that will accommodate the propane tank for short term, the initial buying of the buses until the longer term solution is addressed. So I believe that in the summer, we will be prepared sometime in the fall to have a conversation about what that looks like.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, well, and the other thing that Mr. Bray had said was that if we do the 4 and then don't have a solution for taking on more afterwards, it's sort of like, are we going to be flipping back? Or at least I thought that's what the.
Yeah, we will not move forward with the short-term solution of getting the propane tank if the long-term solution is not addressed.
Okay.
It's to be addressed before we move forward with the short-term solution. The short-term solution is just letting you know that if the property committee and the board are on board of moving forward with a long-term solution at the transportation center, then we have the mechanism to begin purchasing propane buses with a propane tank on the site as it is configured right now.
Okay. And then one more thing, just going back to, Bluebird expecting to have these in 2027. I think there was mention of conversions. So that's conversions of existing Bluebird diesels. And if that's the case, is that something where we would do consider older buses or newer buses where they have more life in their chassis, or is that not something that we would really look at this point?
Yeah, so my apologies. That's me maybe not choosing my words carefully. We would not be looking to convert anything that is existing on the lot, nor would that be my recommendation. I think we would run into a great expense, and as you kind of mentioned, the chassis, very often, even in that diesel realm, rot to the chassis is what gets us. Rot to, as we're spraying road salt and everything up under the buses, they can only last for so long feasibly. So where I say conversion, a propane engine for this type of application actually starts its life through Ford Motor Company as a gasoline engine. That engine gets shipped to a specific company that has a partnership with Ford and is authorized to do real modifications. They have access to Ford software. They're allowed to reprogram, the computers that drive the engine and vehicle. They take that gasoline engine. They take a couple of gas components off of it. They add a couple of propane engines to it. So where propane components. So where I say convert, I was referring to taking that gasoline engine and upfitting it for propane.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Did I have KD?
Hey, Mr. Bray, when you spoke to the other transportation directors, what are the other than like cost and greenness, what are some of the things that they liked about the propane buses? And if someone was going to make an argument for diesel buses, what might be some of the advantages there?
Okay, sure. So I'll go first, I think, with arguments if somebody wanted diesel vehicles. One of the things that you'll kind of hear is diesel vehicles will go so much further and the infrastructure is greater for something that does go further. You know, if you're running a trip that is going completely to the other end of the Commonwealth, diesel fuel you're going to find at any truck stop and at any fueling station. Where while the propane public infrastructure is getting better, it's going to be a lot harder to find a 24-hour site that's 400 miles away. It takes a little bit more planning. That's not to say it can't be done, but once you're in that propane vehicle, you got to be really careful that maybe when you do drop the soccer team off 400 miles away, you've got to drive 30 minutes away to a station and get there before 7 p.m. when they close, things like that. So that is kind of an argument for diesel. Arguments against diesel, obviously, yes, our emissions are that the emission standards are about to be getting worse. Model year 2027 has some new EPA standards kicking in that are anticipating engine costs to go higher on diesel engines. So we do anticipate a diesel powered vehicle getting more expensive, and they weren't cheap to start with, truth be told. And in speaking with other directors that are currently equipped with propane, there's things like it's quieter. It's a little bit easier on the driver because it's a quieter vehicle overall. Now, again, ours are already, even as the diesel's kind of quiet because our engine is all the way in the back. But those propane powered engines are nice and quiet. It takes away a lot of the hard start or no starts that sometimes you see on cold winter mornings. Propane engines start up really, really nicely, whether it's hot weather or cold weather. So where district operations used to maybe sometimes bring people in at 4 o'clock in the morning, especially as the fleet gets older and older, just so they can make sure the fleet starts and runs and stays running when it's super cold out. Propane engines, you can show up at your regular time, turn the key, and they are just plain going to start.
Wow.
Additionally, total cost of ownership is anticipated to be a little bit lower. Some of the more complex components of the diesel engine, especially as it relates to emissions, are not necessary on those propane engines, whether it just be because the engine doesn't need it to match the same performance, or they don't need it because the emissions are already a little bit cleaner. So some of the components, engine related or emissions related components that actually right now here at Springfield are sometimes costing us some significant money. I can toss out there a turbocharger as an example. Diesel engines have turbochargers on them. They are something that we hope is going to last the entire life of the vehicle, but they don't always do it. Replacing those turbochargers can cost us somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000 per vehicle when they go. And that's a component that just plain is not on that propane engine. So that's certainly not to say that you won't have mechanical problems. It's a machine. You're still going to see, different challenges. But some of those complex components are just not there anymore. So working on the vehicles a little bit easier, keeping it on the roads a little bit easier, and a little bit more cost effective just in some of those component costs.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Eileen?
Were we going to revisit at some point? I know like a long while back, there was talk of trying to find a new space for the bus depot, but I don't know whatever happened with that topic. Did it fall off, or is this not the right committee for that discussion?
No, it is the correct committee. It's not that it fell off, it's that our search efforts were exhausted. There's no property in the township or in the, I would say, immediate outside of the township that could accommodate moving the bus depot. Um, right now, as you know, we're kind of split. There's smaller buses parked at the middle school lot, and then the larger buses at the current depot. We have looked and explored property and possibilities, but there's just nothing available that we could just move the depot to. So we're at a point, and this was discussed at a past property committee meeting, where we are going to have a conversation about the current bus depot. That might be the option of where we're at. that there's something that needs to be done differently. That is the study that CMTA is doing this summer, to look at options on what can happen at the current depot, that will be able to allow us to accommodate, and then upgrade, the site, because there's some infrastructure issues down there, that have nothing to do with propane or diesel buses. It's a building that needs to be taken a look at. So that study is being done this summer, and we're hoping to have a recommendation and long-term solution, for the bus depot, which would incorporate propane if anything were to be done there.
And does it have to be within the township borders? Like how
We would
far are we allowed to go?
It's not necessarily how far we're allowed to go. We then start to deal with, as we call it, dead time of driving, getting to the district to pick up students. And then that starts to impact overall subsidy cost and reimbursements from the state, because you're not actually transporting students when you're traveling to get into the township to pick up students. So it's not a no to look outside of the township. I'll tell you, it would be it's always hard, to have conversations about putting a bus depot in a neighborhood or an area. Nobody wants buses in their backyard. So it would be extremely challenging to go into another township and ask for Springfield Township buses to be placed into, a township that the school and district is not even in. So there's some challenges. It's not insurmountable. But that's a conversation that we'll have at the future property committee about what you're discussing here. That is the study that we're doing this summer. So we can revisit that conversation at that time. But there has been efforts to look for properties. We always keep our eyes out, to look and see if there's anything that's available that comes up. So we always do have our eyes on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, Neil, did you have another comment?
I'll save it for later.
Okay. Anybody else, with any questions on this slide? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bray, for the presentation. Our last, agenda topic, is the middle school renovations project update. And before I hand it off to Mr. Grice, this presentation has its own agenda in itself. So we will be reviewing, updates, and it's super exciting to watch. You know, we started this journey, I think, a year ago, a year and a half ago, to start to see everything coming together. It is, going from the digging holes for the auditorium to actually see it coming to life. So there's some exciting updates in here. So we'll talk about the auditorium, kitchen and cafeteria commons, the clinical suite, which they are doing an excellent job on. They're moving quick in there. The exterior site work, universal restrooms. We'll have a conversation about HVAC units. And then, the last one is change orders. As you know, last board meeting, we did a change order approval for the geothermal well. We have a couple more, not as quite as a hefty price tag as the geothermal. So, these are a little bit lighter. But these will need formal board action. I think at least three of them will be on Monday's agenda, but we can talk about that when we get there. So I'm going to hand this off to Mr. Grice. And Mr. Grice, if you just let me know when you would like me to, flip the slides, I will do so.
Hey, we'll do. How's my mic check? Is my mic working? We're
Sounds
good.
great.
All right, great. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'll try to be brief this morning so that you can all get on with your day. But as Ms. Green said, it's been very exciting over the past few months and really heading into the summer timeframe to wrap up the final portion of the project. I know that we are only in front of you every couple months to provide these updates, but we've been meeting weekly, if not daily, with Dr. Mangano and the staff, and weekly with the administration to make sure that we're staying on the same page and that expectations are in line. So this is a great overall image of the current development of the middle school site. We're going to kind of step through some of the specific areas that are still under construction. As you remember, we did a phased project to kind of pick apart pieces of the building at a time so that we could obviously maintain occupancy and instruction. So auditorium, this is one area that had kicked off right from the start with the beginning of site work, with the installation of subsurface storm basins. We had some soil exchange that we needed to do to get ready for the building foundation. So this has been our longest phase, this large new construction of the auditorium, and you'll see how exciting it is in a few slides. So we are on track for completion in by August of 2026. And again, you'll see some pretty exciting photos as we move along here. So next. So looking from the paper mill road side, you can see that as far as the exterior of that addition, our roof is watertight. We have permanent windows installed. They're putting the finishing touches of the metal panel facade out there. So again, things are really moving along nicely with getting the area up, watertight, weathertight, and ready for finishes, which are obviously very critical for that space in terms of acoustic panels, stage rigging equipment, all the sensitive systems that are going to be within that area. Next. So right adjacent to that auditorium addition, we also had to create a new retaining wall abutting the 309 interchange there. So that was really a critical piece in maintaining access in and out of the site and really shaping that side of the site. Obviously, our pedestrians coming from the high school campus are using the tunnel, and that retaining wall ties in nicely with how we're going to maintain pedestrian access over in between the two sites. So looking inside currently, the left is a rendering from the design phase. So what you'll see kind of the side-by-side comparison on the right, that's a photo of our actual status at this point. And what you can't see up in all the black space up there are all the mechanical rough-ins for ductwork, for lighting, all the cables that are going to be holding those suspended clouds, all the types of stuff that you're going to not see once those acoustical clouds are installed. So between the wall panels and the suspended ceiling panels, those types of finishes are in progress, and we'll see a lot more of those finishes going up in May and June. So it'll be pretty exciting to see that visual really take shape with some of the finishes that are going to support the acoustics and the performing arts of that space. Next. Okay, right behind the auditorium, we had an extension to the existing kitchen to provide some more space for food service equipment. That process started right after the winter break of 25, 26. So from January through August, that space is under construction. And Kara, if you want to hit the next slide. Image on the left was just a few weeks ago with getting metal studs and the kitchen space really under construction in terms of individual spaces, walls for the food service equipment, for the dishwasher, and all the systems that support that kitchen. And on the right, a photo just a few days ago of the condition getting ready for floor finishes, getting ready for tile wall finishes. So things are moving along very nicely in the kitchen. That is typically one of the more complicated spaces to construct and coordinate, if you can imagine. There are a lot of different systems that need to come together and be coordinated to support that kitchen equipment system. So a lot of good things happening in there, and again, on track for completion this summer. Okay, so phase 2B includes what we call the stacked bathrooms. So that's our existing 3-story classroom wing. We have 3 sets of group bathrooms that are stacked on top of each other. This has really been a tough area to coordinate for the summer timeframe. We've had many meetings with the contractors trying to coordinate and condense the schedule as much as possible. What ultimately was determined, just given the amount of piping and conduit and systems that need to be basically stacked on top of each other from floor 1 to floor 3, that summer window, we need to extend that work a little bit into the school year. So we've worked closely with Dr. Mangano and Dr. Yannicone and staff to make sure that There are adequate numbers of facilities for that time frame, and thank them for their accommodations with helping out with this phasing and scheduling. So we are targeting the second floor to be complete by October 1st, and then the third and first floors to trail about 2 weeks each after that. So again, that's a lot of work, a lot of pretty intensive demolition and reconstruction within a pretty tight space. And again, that does not help with scheduling. We have a lot of trades, contractors, essentially trying to work on top of each other to get these constructed. So again, we thank you for that, a little bit of a buffer heading into the school year. But again, those are going to be very similar to the ones that were completed up by the new main office and cafeteria area. So we'll have individual stalls and then a common wash area closer towards the corridor side. Okay. Okay, phase 3A. So this was the pre-existing main entrance of the building, which is now being converted to the clinical suite. So similar to the kitchen, these renovations started in January of 26 and are certainly on track for completion in August. And Kara, if you want to switch over, you'll see a couple images of the status. So that addition, which had previously been sort of the canopy and the entrance into the old lobby, that is now structure is complete. Our brick veneer is complete. And moving inside, we have finishes installed with ceiling tiles and carpet and wall base, a couple final devices to install, some ceiling tiles to drop, and just a final touch-up of paint. But that area is in very good shape for an early move-in over the summer timeframe. And that's something that I know was a critical aspect from the administration to make sure that we had a very good plan and good schedule for moving staff into that area well ahead of September. Okay. All right. And then also coming up to start and finish in the summer will be the final conversion of the cafeteria or the commons area. So new finishes to be installed, some new acoustical and ceiling clouds, so to speak, up top. So that once that kitchen partition comes down, that's currently separating the work in the kitchen and the cafeteria, as soon as students are out, that partition will come down and we can make the final completion of that overall commons area. So that is all slated to happen over this summer. All right, so looking out at the site, a lot of work, obviously, with this geothermal well field, which is pretty much in the middle of that large bare area out there. You'll also see a lot of the staging area materials, storage containers, office trailers. We've been working with Mr. Watley and Dr. Mangano to make sure that we have a plan for getting those materials out and into certain areas around the site over the summer so that we can shape the final development of that site. Okay. With the well field, on that top left photo, you see all those, I call them sprouts coming out. Those are the vertical wells that are going down 200 plus feet into the earth. Those then get collected into a series of horizontal pipes, which ultimately feed into that box, which you see on the lower right. And from that box, those pipes connect into two main feeds, one going in, one coming back to the field from the building. So that work is all in the final stages of getting all that piping connected so that we can get it tested, flushed, and ready to support the equipment that it will be serving for the HVAC equipment that's slated for final installation over the summer. All right, a couple other site features which were just underway this week. Again, on the left, you can see the view of that retaining wall that's coming out of the tunnel and looking down past the auditorium. And to the right, we have, that's our new dumpster enclosure, which is also a retaining wall system with that fence. And Kara, if you want to flip over, you can see some additional fence areas going in around the site, pretty much for pedestrian control, pedestrian access, funneling towards that main entrance. So a lot of site features happening at this point, and again, getting ready for that final site push over the summer. So what I wanted to just show you here, I kind of ghosted in the development of what's going to happen on that site. So I mentioned about the trailers to be pulled out, the office trailers, the storage containers, and you can kind of see the ball field footprint and where that's going to be situated in relation to where we have that equipment now. So again, contractors we have worked with, coming up with a schedule for removal of items from that area so that the final site development and ball field can be constructed over the summer timeframe. Okay, moving to the classroom unit ventilators. So this was a scope of work, again, slated for that 3-story existing classroom wing to happen over the summer of 2026. These are individual classroom vertical heat pump units. These units are manufactured by a company called Airedale, and Airedale is owned by Modine. I know that you guys have been in tune a little bit with some of the issues. Maybe you've heard some of the recent news stories. So if you hear Airedale, if you hear Modine, it's basically the same company. But essentially, there was an issue in a few schools in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and also one or two out in Washington State, where similar units to be installed at the middle school were having issues over the winter time, and a few actually had caught fire. The units, unfortunately, slated for the middle school are an identical make of the units in question. So there have been some investigations that have started on a federal level and some actions taken by Modine to try to stay ahead of the issues and how to correct them. So at this point, we have put a pause on the installation of these units, which again were slated to start in May and continue over the summer months. We do have some information from Modine regarding the situation and what has been done to correct units to date. However, I know that the district is looking for 4 points before you are comfortable, and certainly before we would recommend proceeding with the installation of these units. So they've come up with a corrective action which they feel is proper for this, which would include the installation of additional fuses. However, we want to make sure, whether it's through a third party or through a site visit physically, that we can go to the Modine factory, make sure that any units that are tagged for Springfield Middle School, we have the serial number, we have confirmation that the fuses have been installed, and we have visual confirmation as well. Also looking for confirmation that the UL certification for the units are not in jeopardy. We are initially told that that will not be the case, that the UL certification will be in play, but we are looking for some additional written confirmation to that effect. And also there's an ongoing and open investigation with the Consumer Product Safety Commission regarding the potential issues, any recall procedures that may be necessary. And we just want to make sure, again, based on that federal involvement, that Springfield is in tune and informed of any recent developments regarding any investigations or recommended actions coming from a federal level. And finally, your insurance company obviously was made aware of the situation. I believe the preliminary response was that if the proper procedures can be addressed with correcting the units, that the insurance will not be affected. However, I think until we get the final pieces from Modine and others, we just want to make sure that that will be the case, that your insurance coverage will not be affected, which would prevent the installation of these units. So a lot of ongoing discussions. I'm sure that Modine has been inundated with similar requests from owners and from attorneys. We are providing as quickly as possible any updates to the administration. We're also looking into impacts of if we defer the installation of these units to next year, whether it's over breaks or maybe even next summer, what would the cost impacts be with that? Obviously, with a prevailing wage project, we'd have to see if there are any wage increases that would have to be factored in. But again, at this time, we're still collecting information, and we will bring options to the administration in terms of what that looks like from a cost and timing standpoint.
There might be some questions particular to this slide. We have one more slide left in the overall presentation. So is everybody comfortable just getting through that last slide, and then we can come back to any questions for the project update, this slide in particular, and possibly the next one? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And finally, just a summary slide here for some change orders, which essentially are adjustments to contract amounts and that require board approval. So we did want to update the board with some of the recent items. The first one has to do with the middle school project. This would be for the creation of a new flagpole location. If you may remember, the old location was in front of the previous main entrance. That parking lot has been reconfigured and traffic patterns have changed. So there's a proposed location now at the new main entrance, just to the left of the library as you're walking down to the main entrance. And this would be for the development of a new concrete area with embedded lights and a new flagpole to really create a nice landscaped area as kind of a focal point for a flagpole location at the new main entrance. So to accommodate that, we have costs from Bracy Construction, who's the general contractor. That would be for the flagpole assembly itself, as well as the concrete and the landscaping, and Electrotech, who's the electrical contractor for the illumination, the fixtures and the conduit to support the lights that would be incorporated with that. Okay. We also are in the process of finalizing some changes that have to do with the existing mechanical room. So first floor of the middle school, we have all of our new geothermal piping coming into the building and meeting up with existing piping, pumps, conduits, panels, a lot of the very critical electrical and mechanical systems that support the entire building all kind of come together in this mechanical room downstairs. What we found through the coordination process with the contractors is we really need to make quite a few adjustments to mechanical piping in order to accommodate space constraints within that room. There are existing concrete beams which support the floor above that we're just not able to get through. We had to go under and are just creating a lot of challenges with the pipe routing within that room. We have to maintain certain clearances around electrical equipment. We have to maintain clearances to service items such as water softeners and boilers and some other things. So it's been quite an extensive effort to try to make that room work within the space constraints. We are currently analyzing a cost from JBM, who is the mechanical contractor that's under review with Snyder Hoffman Engineers and Schrader Group, who obviously are the design team. We're still working through some pricing reviews and updates with the contractor, but we would like to bring forth that change order for approval in June. So once we have an update with what that final cost will be, we can share that with the administration and get that document drafted for approval in June. Okay. All right. So some of the other capital projects from last summer, and this is good because when we see negatives on a change order, that's always a good thing. So what that means is the district will be credited for unused allowance. So for each project, we include an allowance, which would be for unforeseen factors. For example, with the field upgrades at the middle school, if there were to be unsuitable soil, if there were to be factors related to excavation that are unforeseen, we include an allowance in the contract to handle those types of things. So the good news is from T&E Construction Services, we did not have to expend that allowance. Similar for Procom Roofing at the high school Phase 3 roof project, we had some allowance funds in there. So those were not needed. Those will be credited out of the final contract amount to the amount of 53,000 for the field project and 55,000 for the roof replacement.
So just so everybody on the board understands what this means, we're not getting checks back from the company. We didn't overpay them and then they're crediting us back. What ends up happening is at the beginning of when we bid out these contracts, the board approves an award. A change order either increases or decreases the amount of the initial award that the board approved. In these two instances, what ended up happening is that because the allowances were not fully utilized, the amount of the contract that the board initially approved ended up being less than what actually happened. We were under budget. It's a good thing. So we didn't spend as much as we had anticipated when we opened bids and we awarded the project. And it was due to the credits for the unused project allowances. So with formal action, you are approving the credits because it altered the amount of the original bid award. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yes.
Wanted to explain that we're not actually getting funds back, that it's just a formality, but it is still a good thing. So at this time, that's the end of the middle school update presentation. I know that was a lot of information. I'm sure there are questions. I see Mr. Needleman's hand is, at least on my thing, he's first. So I'm gonna call on Mr. Needleman first.
All right. Thanks. Ms. Green, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. I'm in the car, so I'm not quite sure about the acoustics and all. Mr. Grace, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the mechanical room change order. Do you have sort of a rough idea of what that change order is going to be, or rather, is it going to be more than the 109 roughly thousand credit that you just talked about?
It will actually be very close to that. So we're anticipating approximately $120,000 amount for those mechanical room changes. We were initially provided with a cost proposal from the contractor that was nearly $200,000, which we needed to obviously review closely, and we are still reviewing. We do feel that they were a bit high on some items, but there certainly is a legitimate cost impact, thinking along the lines of about $120,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm not holding you on anything. I was just curious whether it washes out or what. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeFranco?
I'm just curious about, so was there something unexpected that came up with the mechanical room that required the redesign? Like how did this come up at this phase in the project?
So
I guess my question.
usually the way it works, contractors will bid on drawings and specs as they're presented, and throughout the construction process, there's a coordination effort that needs to happen. I mentioned, coordination between trades for the kitchen, and there's a lot of utilities and a lot of trades that are working on top of each other, next to each other. So we go through a coordination effort. Typically, most items can be accommodated with shifting ductwork 6 inches or a foot, or moving piping or changing the location of sprinkler heads in order to make sure that every system is meshing completely. In this case, just with the limitations space-wise within that room, and until we can get the final selection of products that contractors are providing, we can specify maybe 3 or 4 different types of water softeners or boilers, but to provide competition, we can't necessarily create, here's the only one that you can bid on. So once we get all the pieces together with the actual pieces of equipment, and really start to put everything together and look at the space constraints, it's very difficult to say from the start that here's how the piping and here's how the electric should have been run. In this case, like I said, it's a lot of equipment, large equipment that's trying to fit in a very small area, and would be very difficult, I think, to lay out completely prior to bidding, even in the design phase. So it's a combination, I think, of structure that's difficult to deal with because it's all concrete, and having a very small room that is essentially supporting a lot of equipment.
Just as a follow-up to Mr. DeFranco, prior to the change order being brought forward to the board, administration is meeting, planning on meeting and having this discussion with CHA and Snyder Hoffman to discuss this to ensure and address questions similar to what you brought up in this meeting. So that will happen prior to the finalization of the change order.
Great, understood. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any other hands. So just to wrap up and our next property meeting is to be determined. We don't have one formally scheduled, but action items coming out of this meeting are going to be the flagpole change order, and then the 2 credits for the field upgrade phase 2 and for the roof replacement phase 3. So you will see those under property at Monday's board meeting for approval. Any other questions about the overall presentation? No? If not, then we can adjourn the meeting and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thanks a lot. You too.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.